So,
Oh, yeah, just use the touchpad. Click. Got it.
sorry about that.
You're
Wait,
good.
are you doing it?
Yeah.
Okay,
There you go.
cool. We're ready to go?
Yep.
All right. So thank you for coming out and joining us at the Scholarship Opportunities Program workshop. This one is specifically geared towards engineering and computer science. And so some of the information that we share here will be applicable to other majors as well, but the case studies in particular that we're going to talk about are geared more towards engineering and computer science. Also, we have this, cool QR code that our student workers made. So, you should honor their work and scan it. It also really helps us out. By the way, I'm Dr. David Skelton. I'm one of the primary advisors of the scholarship program. I also have Jessica Walters here, who want to come from the camera for a second.
Hi everyone, I'm a student advisor at SOP.
What's your major?
I'm a double major in cognitive science and English.
And you are a what year?
I'm a second year.
Second year?
Yeah.
Cool. And Jessica, well, we're going to talk about student workers later, but Jessica she's going to be here next year, and so you're going to be here for a little bit. So you can come hang out with Jessica if you come hang out with us too. So what we're going to talk about today then is what SOP is, then some of the opportunities that are available, and then give you some examples of people who have your major, and then talk about how to specifically get involved. So say you like everything that you hear and you want to get to know more about how do you do what they're doing, then we'll talk about that near the end. And so I'm going to turn it over to Jessica now just to talk about kind of what SOP is and how we differ from some of the other scholarship opportunities out there at UCI.
Great, okay. Hi everyone, I'm Jessica. So we'll just start with who our office is, what we do. So at UCI, you are surrounded by a lot of support and a lot of opportunities for scholarships and resources for your applications. But we do want to emphasize, make this very clear, that SOP is a separate entity from the Office of Financial Aid. So financial aid assists you guys in overseeing local campus-based scholarships, but we have separate external scholarships that are unaffiliated with the financial aid office. If you want to check out UCI OFAS scholarships, you can look at Scholarship Central, which is separate, smaller scholarships than what we do. Thank you. So we are different from OFAS, as I said. Our funding is from outside organizations, but you do also get more than just money. If you win any of our scholarships, you get lifetime connections, networking experiences, incredible experiences nationally and abroad, and of course the recognition of actually winning or being a finalist or semi-finalist for any of these awards. So the roles and services at SOP can basically be put into three broad categories: outreach, advising, and recognition. So for outreach, this is of course what we're doing right now. There are a lot of great opportunities for students that you can apply to, and a lot of people graduate without knowing about them, so that's why we're here to present to you all. In terms of advising, we support sophomores to recent alumni in applying to prestigious merit-based scholarships through editing your essays, sharing past winners' applications, and conducting mock interviews along with other advising services like personalized deadline reminders and things like that. So the advice we give is personalized to each student, and we guide you through every step of the advising process. It's not too scary, and you have a lot of assistance along your way. Scholarship agencies also task us with endorsing candidates for their scholarships. So an endorsement from us, our office, is essentially a stamp of approval from UCI as a campus. And a lot of these scholarships have limited spots for applicants, so endorsement from us is important. And we encourage students to develop self-awareness, take strategic risks, and compete for these prestigious awards. Then recognition, we have an award ceremony at the end of the year where we recognize everyone who's gone through this process with us and anyone who's gotten a semi-finalist, finalist, or recipient of any of our awards. So this chart basically shows you the 21 awards that we advise for. They're divided into two application cycles, the Explorers 11 and the Trailblazers 10. So the Explorers 11 advising begins with the pre-application in October and November, so fall quarter. And then after working with your advisors for 3 to 4 months, your applications get submitted to the external scholarship agencies in about winter quarter. And then that Explorers 11 group also includes all of our undergraduate scholarships, as well as 2 one-year internships for graduating seniors. The second category is the Trailblazers 10, which starts in April, so spring quarter. And juniors, seniors, and recent graduates can submit pre-applications for these 10 awards that you can use after graduation, both in the US and abroad, including awards for graduate study if that's what you're interested in. On the chart, the italicized awards require or strongly encourage campus evaluation and endorsement. And then in green are the awards that are eligible to international students. So why do these scholarships matter? We're here to tell you. If you are a winner or a finalist for these highly recognizable awards, you can put it on your resume for the rest of your life. And one component of our school, like UCI as a whole, our national ranking is how many prestigious scholarship winners we have. So you'd be supporting UCI as well. And these scholarships aren't just about the money, as I said, they're about personal development as well. You grow a lot through the process of applying, and even if you don't actually win, you'll learn a lot of strategies to help you get placed into maybe your top grad school or like your dream career. For instance, actually, a student recently applied to Fulbright for the UK, and even though he didn't win, he formed faculty connections at his top choice grad school in the UK, and then planned a grad research project and was eventually admitted to the program and found external funding to study in the UK. So you do get other things just besides, even if you don't win, besides money. So now David can take it away with some case studies of these scholarships.
Yeah, and to kind of add to that, I've been doing fellowships for a while, and another Fulbright example is that I had a student one time who applied to Greece. She didn't get it, but she used part of her application and some of the connections she made to then apply for the classics program at Johns Hopkins and was admitted. So working with our office is beneficial for other avenues that you're thinking about pursuing as well. So one of the awards that we're going to talk about that's really popular at UCI is the Donald Strauss Foundation Award. Now the Strauss Foundation Award is for people to apply for, particularly sophomores and juniors apply for it, because they really want you to do a project that you're passionate about right now that can benefit your community. And so you get $15,000 of funding for some sort of public service project. And you're like, well, what does some sort of public service project mean? That's kind of loose. Well, that's because the Strauss really wants you to apply for something that you're passionate about. And what you're passionate about will look different than what somebody else is passionate about. So, we have some students that have applied to help homeless in Bangkok. We've had students apply for a project with healthcare. We have students that are applying to help with teaching and music, and so those are all different things, but those are all viable Strauss candidates because they're writing about projects that they're passionate about. And so competitive Strauss candidates have 1 year of previous leadership experience and a well-conceived project, and that's the thing that in the Strauss application, that's the hardest part is, okay, I have an idea, but how do I make that idea happen? What am I going to do with $15,000 if I get it? And that's the part that you're going to have to make a case for. And we help you with that. And the typical applicant's a sophomore or junior with 1 to 2 years of undergraduate study remaining, but you can apply if you're a super senior. And also international and DECA students are encouraged to apply. For example, our most recent Strauss winner is from Thailand, and so international students are definitely welcome to apply for these awards. Go to the next slide. So one of our Strauss winners in engineering is Janet Song. Janet is a junior majoring in civil engineering with a minor in mathematics. So Janet won the award for her service project implementing the Youth Participatory Action Research Model to guide a team of Oakland's high school juniors and seniors in researching the ways digital inequality has impacted their communities. And so, yes, you will have some people who, when they think of community and think of what project can I do to help my community, they think about Irvine and they think about UCI. But there are then people like Janet who's thinking about Oakland and thinking about her community there, or in Hugh's case, who I just recently mentioned, he was thinking about his community back home in Thailand. And so what community is and what that public service project is varies. And so Janet, as you can kind of see on the slide, she as an associate research intern, she worked with Library Without Borders. She worked on domestic violence advocacy, was a learning assistant in the math department, and she wrote, she presented at a UCI engineering conference. So these are just examples of things you can do to become a competitive applicant. And so her Strauss project was conducted in collaboration with Libraries Without Borders, Watch and Learn Initiative, which places computer workstations and laundromats, allowing low-income and underserved, so the basic idea is, there's going to be people who are perhaps don't have computer access but need computer access to use laundromats. And so if we place computers and laundromats in Oakland, it'll be more equitable for those communities to have access to the internet. That was her project. So a more kind of sciencey based award is the Goldwater. It is the most prestigious undergraduate award. You can apply for it as a sophomore. In fact, our 2 Goldwater candidates this cycle are both sophomores. But you can also apply for it as a junior. And what they do is they fund your undergraduate education depending upon if you have 1 year left or 2 years left. And it is for anyone in STEM. So sometimes, you might read an application that's in polymer science, and so you think I have to be in polymer science, or you might read an application that's only doing engineering, so you think I have to be in engineering, but they really are thinking in all areas of STEM. And what they want to do is they want to encourage people to pursue a research career. So if you're thinking about going to med school, it's not that they don't want you, they actually do have some, and we have had some winners at UCI in the past who have done dual MD PhDs, but they really want people who are going to pursue a PhD and to write about their research and what research are you doing right now. It has a research proposal component where you talk about some of the research you're doing. You also have to have a 3.7 GPA. Writing a proposal with UROP, the undergraduate research department, they are really helpful in this regard. And so a lot of our applicants have also worked with UROP, who is an office right next to us on the 5th floor. So you might think about that. But the Goldwater is a great scholarship to pursue. And one of the great things about the Goldwater is even if you don't win it, a lot of what's in the Goldwater is also in the NSF, and it's also in graduate school applications, and it's also in other science-based awards. So working on the Goldwater actually is kind of killing lots of birds with one stone, because then it helps you with other applications as well. Can you go to the next slide? So an example of one of our recent Goldwater winners is Pretush. Pretush is a transfer student from California State University, Los Angeles, and now a UCI Alumni Association in computer science. He's now at Stanford, actually. But his research was in artificial intelligence-based traffic monitoring, and he also did a joint research project with the city of Los Angeles itself and NASA to predict air pollution and its health effects on residents. And under UCI Vice Chancellor for Research, Dr. Pramed Karagangar, he studied, because he's not here anymore, he's now at Stanford. He was studying deep learning for empathy-based AI. And then he started working at the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory to develop SDNs at the exascale in the area of big data, machine learning, and cloud computing. And again, now he's at graduate school at Stanford. And he actually recently, so we get to celebrate it because he's a UCI alum. He recently won an NSF. So that pipeline between applying for graduate school, applying for Goldwater, and then applying for the NSF, Pretush is an example of how you can connect those two. So the next thing I want to talk about is a program that's near and dear to my heart, and that is the Fulbright program. Why do I say that? Because I am a Fulbrighter, and if you would have, and I got a 23 on my ACT, so, and I also have a PhD. So maybe that just completely dilutes that pool of prestige now. But, it's not all about test scores and things of that nature is what I'm saying. If you're one of those students who think, not me, I don't have the best whatever score, or I work really hard on my classes, but I'm not the most brilliant, whatever, my friend over here, they're so much smarter than me, so why would they pick me? I've been there. And, you eventually have to believe in yourself or have somebody that believes in you and drags you across the finish line, which was, in my case, someone else that believed in me and said, you're going to apply for this, come on. And that's what we do in SOP. We tell you how awesome you are and help you get across the finish line. The Fulbright is one of our most popular awards because there's tons of countries that you can apply for, and there's more and more countries and awards being added all the time. So for example, the Fulbright ETA to Switzerland is new for this year. And there's three types of awards you can do for Fulbright. One of them is teaching English in another country. Then one of them is getting a master's degree in another country. And that one is a 2-year award. And then the other one is what's called a research award. So there's the study component, getting a master's degree. And then there's the research award, which is you already have an established research project that you want to do, but you know that you can't do it here. You need to do it in my case, Germany, or in Brazil, as one of my recent students did. And so you write about what your research is, why you need to go to Brazil to do it, and Fulbright gives you money to do that. So it's a really popular award for that reason, because there's all kinds of avenues in terms of either going to teach English or going to get a master's degree or working on a project near and dear to your heart that has a study abroad international component. Go to the next slide. So there's also field-specific Fulbright awards, and each country has ones that are near and dear to its heart. So for example, France has a lot of the music and arts ones, as you would expect France to have. But for engineering, there's a Fulbright for the Netherlands, for industrial design, for Singapore, for urban planning and sustainable design. Spain has a lot of the computer and tech stuff, and Taiwan has a lot of the stuff geared towards engineering. So there's other opportunities for Fulbrights. Now for a Fulbright, you can't really apply for a Fulbright until you're either a senior who is about to graduate, or you've already graduated and you're a 1-year alumnus. Then you can work with our office. If you're in graduate program and you're way past us eventually, you can still apply for a Fulbright, you just can't do it through our office. There's a different office on campus that does that. So if you forgot about the Fulbright 5 years from now, you're like, oh, Fulbright sounds awesome, you can still apply for it. So some examples of people who've won Fulbrights, and give you examples of different types of projects that are out there. So Alexander, what's unique about Alexander is not only is he a first-gen student, but he also was an adult student, so a non-traditional student who entered as a transfer student later on in life. And particularly people like Alexander, when you're entering as an adult, you really can. There is a lot of imposter syndrome of, well, maybe it's too late for me to apply for this award or apply for that award. But not with Alexander. He was a go-getter. He participated in multiple engineering programs or research projects, including a gluten detecting smartphone device and autonomous search and rescue drones and sensors to monitor arm injuries and robotic hand responses. He also worked in the communities of disadvantaged minority youth. He mentored events like Engineering School of Office of Access and Inclusion and the Society of Hispanic and Professional Engineers. He worked with that program. And he applied for the Fulbright and the NSF. He was awarded a Fulbright to perform neurosurgical robotics at the University of Toronto. And then while he was in Canada on his Fulbright, he started applying for graduate fellowships and received an honorable mention for the NSF And then he was awarded a National GEM Consortium Fellowship to fund his PhD. So again, as we were talking about how these fellowships, it's not just the money component. There's networks, there's relationships that you build that then lead you to other types of networks that can then lead you to other networks that can help fund things that are for later on. So that's a great, Alexander is a great example of that. We go to the next slide. So, and then another example of someone who's applied for lots of different awards is Mohammed Abedi. Mohammed is a Palestinian refugee, and so his parents fled from the United Arab Emirates, and so he worked in deportation, and he worked he worried about deportation and refugee communities, and so that was an issue that was near and dear to his heart. He studied originally at Irvine Valley College and planned to become a medical doctor, but when he transferred to UCI, he got a passion for biomedical engineering, engaged in multiple research projects. For example, he helped build air-powered computers for use in health diagnostic devices. And then in 2013, kind of building off of President Obama's multi-billion-dollar brain initiative to drive research to improve tools for brain research, he developed a device that uses light to study the brain non-invasively. He eventually won both the NSF, the National Science Foundation Graduate Research Fellowship, and the Paul and Daisy Soros Fellowship for New Americans to fund his graduate study at Caltech. Go to the next slide. So speaking of graduate awards, I want to talk about the abroad awards first, and then going to talk about the domestic awards. So out of this list right here, you might recognize the Rhodes. It's one of the most prestigious fellowships in the world. It's from the late 1800s, and so it's been around for a while. And sometimes politicians will argue about who's a real Rhodes Scholar and who's not, so they will fight about that. But it's designed to, all of these awards, the Rhodes Scholarship for U.S. applicants are designed to promote relationships between the U.S. and other nations. But all of these also have an international student component to them. So if you want to apply for Rhodes and Marshall, you can apply as an international student. It's just the application is a little bit different than the U.S. one. You can't use the U.S. site, but we can still work with you for that. In terms of, now the Rhodes and Cambridge and Marshall and Mitchell, that's for any graduate degree. Or the Schwartzman, that is in Tsinghua, China, and that is more looking at global policy. That's the degree that they fund. So the Schwartzman isn't for any degree. It's very specific. But again, international students can apply. You can go to the next slide. As far as domestic awards, so we talked about Mohammed earlier, how he won the Paul and Daisy Soros. This is designed for people who are first-generation Americans. And so if your parents were born in another country, but you were born here, then you are eligible for this award, and it pays for 2 years of graduate school. He applied for that award and the NSF, so you can double dip or triple dip on some awards. Not all awards, because when I won a Fulbright and then I won an award from the German government, I was told by the German government I couldn't take both. Sad day. So it really depends upon the award. Some awards you can combine funding. Some awards you can't. Mohammed was an example of someone who combined the Soros with the NSF. The Knight Hennessy is for any graduate degree at Stanford. You can also apply for this as an international student. And the NSF is the most popular graduate degree award in the sciences. You can apply for the NSF as a senior, and then you can also apply for it again as a graduate student. So many people will do both to try to get double the experience. And well, if I don't get it the first year, at least I know what to do now, and now I'll apply for it in graduate school. But it pays for your graduate school funding. And a lot of people who apply for the Goldwater use part of their Goldwater application to help them with the NSF. So it's hard to generalize 21 applications, but what a lot of the applications do have in common are these components. A project or a study proposal, personal statement, letters of recommendation, a CV or some sort of resume component, some generalized application forms about like who you are, your address, your phone number, all that jazz, and then transcripts. Now, what differs then is what they're looking for. So, for example, Goldwater and NSF are very research oriented. They want a research proposal. They want to see, they want to see your diagrams. They want to see your formulas. If you're a chemist, like you have to have a research proposal that shows how you think as a researcher. Or if you're a computer programmer, actually, I don't even know what a computer programming research paper looks like. So, but something research paper wise. But if you're trying to do Strauss or you're trying to do Truman or something that's more public service oriented, policy oriented, they want to know, how does your work as a computer scientist or how does your work in medicine, how does that inform a project you want to do in the community? So those proposals will look very different, even though both of those applications require proposals. Personal statements, again, is going to be slightly different. Can we go to the next slide? And so now what I want to do is turn it back over to Jessica. I think that you're up next.
Yeah.
Okay, to talk about, now that you've seen all these full awards and different people who've won them, and we've talked about who we are as SOP, how do you get to be those people, and how do you work with us to put your name in the ring?
Okay, yeah, so as David said, we sort of gave you an overview of our office. We gave you some opportunities of scholarships in your subject area and gave you some examples of our students who have applied. So what can you do right now to get started in this process? So you can use our campus resources strategically, even if you are a little bit afraid of all the accomplishments of the people we've shown you, because I know sometimes I am when I look at our candidates and like, wow, these people are really, really accomplished. But we're here to tell you that you could do it too. Like, you're an amazing student, and all the winner profiles you saw started as students just like you. They were attending this workshop, they took our important tips, and you can just continue to do well in your classes, get involved at higher levels. So right now, what can you do to position yourself to be a strong candidate? You can keep being a great student and take advantage of all of our resources, especially the ones that are listed on the slide here. And then we also just wanted to let you know that each award has different characteristics that they're looking for. So some might be more focused on community service or study abroad, but they're generally looking for students who have passion, put work into that passion, and are trying to make an impact. Especially if you're a leader in the classroom, your lab, a club, anything like that. So some challenges we usually hear that students are facing are they don't know professors well enough to get a letter of recommendation, they don't have enough leadership or service experience, or they think your GPA is not competitive. You can get tutoring, go to office hours, hang out with your professors, get involved on campus. There are lots of opportunities for that. Our competitive applicants look pretty different across all disciplines and career interests, but leadership is a vital component because especially you can demonstrate your leadership through like your personality, your style, lead, and things that you're passionate about. And also, just as a side note, SOP also facilitates the Phi Beta Kappa Honor Society, which we will be talking about soon. So we just sort of mapped out some things that you could do to be competitive. This little list sort of maps out the application process, but doing any of these things now helps you become a more competitive applicant. And our strongest applicants are those who start working on this now, and you're not just waiting until your junior or senior year, the very last minute, and then you realize you don't have any of the experiences necessary to apply. Our applicants aren't really just like checking off boxes of things that you think you need to do to win. You can follow your passions, do things that you're interested in, and you can get the most out of your college experience, especially working with our office. We can help you figure out how to market yourself and have a stronger portfolio.
Do you want to do that? Okay.
Okay, so we have another little chart for you here. So if you're looking to start with your scholarship journey, you can attend one of our informational workshops, which you're doing right now. Congratulations. If you're interested in other fields or topics, we have other workshops as well, so you can take a look at our campus groups to sign up for those. You can schedule an appointment with our office, so a student advisor, me, or my coworkers, and we can walk you through the process, answer questions, discuss opportunities that you might be interested in. And then you can also complete the pre-application which before you do that, you must complete the SOP prep course, which we're going to go over in the next slide. But then you can complete the prep course, meet with a student advisor, or the other way around. It just depends. And then we can help you narrow down your choices and discuss your eligibility. So the SOP prep course, the most important thing you could do like right now is just to sign up for SOP prep. It's on our website. It's meant for undergrads with sophomore higher standing and a cumulative GPA of at least a 3.0. If you're also a recent UCI grad, you can participate if you're still within 4 quarters of graduation. This Canvas course is open entry, open exit, so you don't need our permission to enroll or withdraw. You can just head to our website and join. And it also does not provide any academic credit units, so you're not getting any units from UCI, it's separate. And then we just sort of, a little tip, a great time to do SOP prep would be over spring break if you're planning on applying for our Trailblazers 10 cycle, and you could complete the pre-application then as well. So just a little overview of our SOP prep Canvas assignments. Our assignments are meant to get you thinking about and reflecting on your undergrad academic and extracurricular experiences and thinking about what your future goals might be. There are 4 journals that require about 300-word responses, which you can take breaks in between or do them, sort of on your own timeline. They're just meant to sort of help you gather your thoughts and have a more productive advising appointment with us. And then it also sort of helps you get thinking about what you'd put in your application, which we can help you with as well. Okay, and then David is going to add some last couple notes, and then we will take some questions.
So to wrap it up, I'm gonna briefly mention that SOP also works with Phi Beta Kappa, which is the nation's oldest, most prestigious honor society. It is a distinguished community of 17 U.S. presidents, 40 Supreme Court justices, even our very own Chancellor Gilman. And it provides excellent networking and a lifetime membership. And also, it does have a lifetime membership fee, but not that you pay it like every year, but you pay it one time and then it's good. But Chancellor Gilman, being a member, he really encourages people to join PBK, so UCI helps you pay for that. And also, another thing to mention about it is that outside of, it's an invite only, so, and the stipulations are really complicated about who they pick and don't pick, so I don't have them all memorized, but usually 1% of the top 1% of juniors and 5% of seniors. But there's also lots of just PBK events on campus that with speakers, like we have one coming up that's talking about aging, for example, that anyone can go to. There's also PBK scholarships. Some of them, like the PBK Service Scholarship, anyone can apply to. So look into PBK, even if you're not eligible for it right now, there might still be some events and some other things that you might be interested in checking out. And then the last thing I want to talk about is come and joining us and help Jessica out, because we actually have lots of students that are graduating, and if no one comes and helps Jessica out, it's just going to be her by herself, and it'll be sad. She'll be so lonely. We don't want Jessica to be lonely. No, just come work with us. It's a great place to work. In fact, we've had some people who've loved working for us so much as a student, they came back. So to work, as an advisor and administrator. So we have a great boss. I might ask you to do some things sometimes, but I'm not your boss. Our boss Rose is amazing. So come join us and just keep your ears and eyes out. Also, if you sign in, please, I reminded you at the beginning, but I'm going to remind you again, we have this QR code that is on the next slide. No, it's on the very first slide.
I can go back to it.
Yeah, it's on the very first slide. It's our QR code. Please log into that. That's how we get your information. And it's not so we can stalk you, so we can send you out cool things like, hey, do SOP prep, or hey, the pre-applications are about to open for the Fulbright. You should think about applying for it. Or hey, we have a job. Do you want a job? Come join us. So log into that, scan that code, and that will help us to communicate with you. And going on to the last slide, sorry, can you go back to the last slide? just to completely wrap up, as a reminder, so how do you get in contact with SOP? You can email us at scholars@uci.edu. You can visit our website, which is also scholars.uci.edu. There's a tab in there to self-enroll in SOP prep. And also we have pre-applications coming up. Now, one question we always get is what's the difference between SOP prep and pre-apps? SOP preps is just those small little journal reflections that help us get to know you and help you think through, what is a good plan for, the future or the tabs that you saw on a few screens ago. You don't have to go back to it. Like personal action plan. No one's going to read that and think, that person just wrote the worst personal action plan I've ever seen. I'm never going to work with them. That is just to help you think through an idea. And then when you meet with us, it gives us something to talk about, because you don't want to come sit in our office and then say like, oh, I don't even know why I'm here. I completely blank right now. The SOP prep just helps us to have a conversation. But then the pre-applications are, okay, so you've done SOP prep, you've met with someone like Jessica, and you now know that I want to go for the NSF, or I want to go for Goldwater, or I want to go for Strauss. Now that you've got that narrowed down, the pre-application opens on February 14th, and then you actually have 2 months to do it, but don't put it off. What that allows us to do then is to specifically work with you. You've now written about not just the Strauss, but not just the personal action plan, but you've written about what projects you might be interested in, what you want to do for your career. No one's going to come back and stalk you like 10 years from now and say like, you wrote this in your pre-app, but it's just a way for us to help advise you towards those awards that you're interested in. So SOP prep, that's the most important thing, to start off engaging with our office. Then if you know for sure that like a Fulbright or a Rhodes or something like that is something you want to do, then I encourage you to take the second step, which is filling out the pre-application when it opens a few weeks from now. So any questions? Or I guess before I take questions, what awards that you saw today are you interested in? Anything that sticks out in your mind? The room or the Zoomies?
Oh no, that's
That was
actually
him.
me. I'm sending links.
Any good questions? But if you don't want to be put on the spot, let's go ahead.
I'll just say I'm interested in the Fulbright.
Yeah, Fulbright is amazing. There's also a network that you get added to if you become a Fulbrighter. You can download the Fulbright app and have it on your phone, and we can chat with each other on the Fulbright app. I actually don't use the Fulbright app that much, but it's there. No, but like for example, a recent Fulbrighter just created a jazz album with some like musicians from South America, and he posted about it on the Fulbright app. And I thought it was pretty cool. Any other questions?
We've got nothing from Zoom.
Everyone's tired.
Yeah.
They're just thrilled about this information. They're processing.
So overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Well, if that's it, then I'll let y'all go. And thank you so much for coming. And don't forget about us, because we are here and we want you to win these awards and to get money for graduate school or to get cool internships or to get cool research opportunities. So if, maybe you do forget about us, but then you're like, oh man, I want to do this research project. Who do I talk to? Remember SOP. We're here for you. Are we still recording? Or are we done now?